Okay, so we are back to our second part of the tutorial. I might continue the whole process now or split it into three parts. Now, before we continue to xgen, there are a couple more things we need to do to make this work better. One of them is introduce more um, guides or curve guides, we can call them, in between the current ones. Now, I do have a single liner here. If I move this out of the way, a single line command that will um, basically it's three lines condensed into one using these semicolons that will create a new in between as long as we have the same CV count on our curves. So this is my com over. I want to check what's the poly count. So I think I'm standing close to, yeah, I'm standing on 90 CVs. I want to lower it now that I've done a bit of experimenting with the hair. So I'm just gonna get in here and right away go for something more like 33 is the magic number. And then I'm gonna run this command. So as simple as that, we can create now a new curve. Now, one thing we want to keep in mind is if I'm going to my CVs, if I go to first CV, I want it to be at the root, just like mentioned before. So now, do I want to put it everywhere? Not necessarily. I don't even know if I necessarily need it right here. Oh. Yeah, I don't necessarily need it right here. But in places where I have large gaps, I think it would be a decent idea. So just drop it right here as a Python command. I can always give it like some sort of a um, icon. Let's see, icon name. Maybe there's, I don't know, something that looks like a curve, just so I can recognize it. Cool. Now I can start using it where needed. So even like if I have a larger spacing between these, I can just get in here and fill it just to make sure that we're not left in a situation where there's not enough coverage. And then xgen will interpolate. Even here, I could introduce something like that. And then dv will snap it to where it needs to go, and then here we can kind of decide, because I don't want them to interpolate randomly. I kind of want to have more control over the interpolation. So, and also it will benefit me to move it around, so my roots are not exactly all coming from the same place. That will help as well. So here, if I'm interpolating a new curve, I can actually move the root a little bit further away and then, you know, control a little bit better how it will look. And with 33 CVs, it will be a little bit easier altogether. I don't know if I want this here. This looks like it belongs in the onion. Let's put it right there. Next, let's go to the onion. So as you can see right now, the onion is... Let's actually concentrate on... There we go, these two. So it's decent, but also I want to make sure that it doesn't interfere with my other, let's actually, maybe let's use something like a deformer. So let's use a lattice. And I might go and increase the divisions a bit. And move them around. Because I don't want them to intersect with my top hair. So I feel like this is looking nice. This is looking nice. And there's a little bit room given to the other hairs there. And it might be a decent idea actually to make the top hair as a separate hair system, the onion as a separate hair system. And then we might want to consider, so if I select this onion now and kill history, you see I've removed my deformer, and then, I might want to consider moving some of these curves a little bit more to the left. So again, I can use a deformer for that. And I can reduce there we go, maybe something more like this. And it's okay if it's floating a little bit. It actually is preferable if it floats. Because if it floats, it would have been also a better idea to isolate the inner curves by grouping them as well. So just something to consider. Hopefully some of you are watching it before actually commencing with the work, so in that case you can do it. So you see I'm just moving things around until I'm covering the sufficient surface here. I'm still having a bit of a gap right in the middle, and that will be a problem. But what we could do is very selectively go in there. These guys actually I'll keep where they are. Maybe this one I'll move a bit more to the left, but with a smaller soft selection. And also, like I want it to sit on top of rather than crash through. I think it will work better with what we're going to do next. Now here we can select like every second or third curve. Doesn't really matter that much. And then go to components and just move them a bit higher so we're actually like going through this area, and maybe widening them a little bit too. And bringing them out a little. Like, it's not absolutely essential, but it does help if we do that. And, you know what? I feel like most probably this will do the job. Oops. I've misclicked. There we go. Okay, now another thing to consider is for these pipes that we've converted here, I think it's going to be too many curves right now that we're going to have going into the same point, and it's not really going to give us everything that we need when it comes to defining the form. There's too many of them, and it's going to confuse xgen. So I'm going to reduce them. And then also randomize the tips, most probably. So if we take a look here, somewhere here I have a random script. Let's take a look. There's my random script. It's set to a value of 0.3. So if I run it, I get something like this. Like, it's key now to remember that this separation also is affected by our soft selection. So if I run it like that, I get this. If I run it like this, I get that. So another thing we can do is concentrate it mostly on the y. So here I can put 0.1 and 0.1. And this will actually mostly move things on the y-axis where it's still on 1. So we can do that too. And let's do the same thing here. So I'm selecting all the ones I want to erase, and then kind of looking for what describes my silhouette, what goes on the interior, and I'm strategically removing them. And then erasing. Maybe I'll keep a couple more. I'm thinking something like this. And then I'm gonna go to the tips and randomize them a little bit, so it's not too boring. I suppose I could do the same thing here. I don't suppose, I know. It's going to be important. So here, again, we can kind of try and preserve the ones that we feel are giving us the more important aspects of the look. And then erase the ones that are unimportant. We definitely want some interiors. I think I'll leave it at that. And if I need to introduce more, I do have the so-called technology to do it. And next, let's go to components and run our randomize. Here we can actually keep it on 1 on all axes. And I'll share all the scripts used here. Some of these were made specifically to accommodate for this workflow. And then I might want to come in, because we don't have too many curves, might want to come in and, you know, do a bit more manual labor. This one we can end right here. We'll see. It's going to be much easier to see what to do once once we actually have some hairs being generated on the surface of this, or on the guides that we're going to make out of these. So next, we have the very important task of evenly distributing the roots. So I'm going to hide all of these other curves. I'm going to concentrate on my bangs. So the issue now is with my bangs is the roots of my guides are not evenly distributed. And I want to make sure, like here for example, one of these is not going to properly work because they're so close together. And additionally, I don't want to lose some of my shape, and I don't want to necessarily manually set these with equal distances, even though I could. And that's also an option. But what I'm going to do instead here is, well, first of all, I'm going to cut them down. Because if we concentrate here on what we can see that some of them are cutting in. And are not even visible. So we have to make sure that they're coming out. And also some of the roots are getting in an obnoxious way. So I ended up coming up with a bit of a workflow for that. So what I have to do is extrude this edge and then shift right click to merge vertices to center. This basically closes my mesh and makes it watertight. And this helps me a lot with the script that I'm going to run that has to do with intersections. So basically what I want to do is select everything and run my intersection script. Oops, I really did not want my script editor to go here. This docking option is not always great. This is the script. It will work without PyMel, which is wonderful. So let's run. And what do we get? We get all of the vertices that are going inside of our mesh here, which is wonderful because all we have to do is hit delete, and now we're not crashing into the mesh anymore. So that is great. Now next, what do I want to do? I'm going to hide this and bring back the original hair cap. I'm going to duplicate it, hide the original, and this time what I want is a surface to which I can snap these. So what I'm gonna do is basically, select this surface on both sides. I think I'm doing it correctly. No, it needs to be like this. Right? And then just erase everything else. I'm also gonna separate these two. Awesome. So now I want my surface to be fully quad. And also I want my corners to be a little bit rounder so it doesn't look too rectangular when I'm snapping my hairs pretty soon, because I'm gonna use this surface to spread the roots of my meshes equally. This is a bit of a shortcut that I'm taking here. To be totally honest with you, it's not something that's like essential, but it will improve the results, the behavior of xgen by a lot. So what do I do next? If I go into my UVs for both of these guys, and I go to, what is it, modify unitize, and then move and so, and then I want to normalize both of them. So this will just put them from a value between 0 and 1, and then by holding X, I am putting them and snapping them to the grid and putting them on my UVs from 0 to 1. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to run a script that will snap the first vertex, CV, of each one of my curves here, and I'll give it a bit of a soft selection so it has a bit of a soft transition here. So it doesn't just move one CV, but it actually moves a whole bunch of them. And I'm gonna run yet another script. This is gonna be it. And it's going to snap my roots to a grid-like structure on this grid. And it's gonna use the UVs with a bit of a shrink to do that. And it's gonna leave a couple of, you see here I'm left with like 3 curves that are not properly designated, so at this point I'm just gonna move them by hand into more vacant, empty positions that I can find. So, you know, it's not perfect, but it works for me. And it's like a bit of a extra step that I think, well, I don't think, I know, improves the visual results that we get by a lot. So there we go, side 1 is done. And you can see it tries to snap it in a grid formation. But because the way I'm doing the math here is like, you know, a little bit rushed, when it comes to accommodating for all mathematical possibilities. It just creates like a 4x4 kind of grid and snaps the points to it, which is still better, you know, than not having it. So we got something like this, and then we have to get in here and snap whatever it didn't snap. So in this case, we're actually left with quite a lot of curves. Unfortunately, but it's okay. We'll figure it out. Still gives us a nice beginning from which we can start. So here I'll just move the leftovers by hand, and you can be a bit more precise here. We have 2 more to go. So I'm thinking here. Oops. Just want to shrink that. And I think we have another one. Yeah, there we go. And let's put it maybe here. Like that. And then raise this one a little bit further. So the larger the spacing is in the faces, obviously, the larger the spacing will be. So that's why you see me constantly going to the higher faces. But on the lower ones, we're doing quite well. I might want to come in here and pull them out a little bit, so I'm not crashing. I don't want to crash. Okay, now we're going to select all of our curves, and we're going to rebuild them. This time I'm going to go like maybe 66. So now 66 points. Oh, and I think I would prefer to have them linear rather than cubic. Do I? No, I don't. I don't like this little side effect here. Let's see, let's try again. Okay, we do get a bit of a side effect, but hey, we can go to our component mode, select those components and smooth them out. This is just Maya being the imperfect creature that it is. There we go, still decent. So these guys are they ready to go? Almost. One more thing I'm going to do is snap them to the surface. So let's do that. Basically what I'm thinking here is snap them to the smooth hair cap. So I'm gonna select the curves themselves, select the smooth hair cap. I don't really need to see it. And then I'm gonna run yet another script. This time is going to be this guy over here. And this is a very nice script. What it's going to do, even though the results right now are very ugly, but that has to do with the shape of our hair cap. It actually would work better if we use the head as the target surface, but it doesn't matter to us because all we're going to do now is select all of the CVs minus the first one, DV, snap it to the beginning, scale it down like this, and maybe smooth out this transition. And you see what it does here when we smooth out the transition, it smooths out the transition. So, kill history, get rid of this guy, and then we have some hidden nodes that we can erase as well. We don't have to, but it's just for cleanliness sake, why not? Erase those nodes. So, on our come over, what do we have? We have 35 CVs. So let's also rebuild this to a value of 1, and then let's do 33. And I'll make sure there's no blend shapes or anything. You see, these were the blend shapes because I rebuilt. They were getting upset, misbehaving. And there we go. And we can still come in here. This is still quite imperfect, but I have tested it. It works. We could come in here and introduce some more in-betweens and such. Um, like here the distance is quite large, right? So we could come in and try an in-between. But you see here, because the shapes are so different, we're going to get, a curve that is not very pretty in between the two. So if I do this, I'll definitely have to do some adjusting. Actually, this is not that bad. So I might as well do a bit of that in case I want to have control. Now you see, if we leave this to xgen, it will do exactly what we did here, but just on a mass scale. So what we're doing here, let's see, looks like in this case it did not blend shape between the two. Now why is that? This is my come over, this is the pony. Let's just rebuild all of them again. There we go. Let's try again. Not sure what exactly. There we go. So you see now we get something like this. We definitely need to adjust it to get a nice in-between. And we can still come in here and, change some parameters and such. Definitely want to raise him to come out a bit higher. Raise this guy maybe to come out a bit higher. Doesn't have to be all the way up though, because you see the transition points between them are actually going to be living underneath those higher curves. So again, something we could spend some extra time on and refine. There we go. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the gist of it at this point. And the more even the spacing is going to be, the better this whole scheme is going to look. So here we're getting a bit tight actually. So I might get in here and erase some CVs, shorten this one. We can always select the entire, let's hide these, we don't need them anymore. We can actually erase them or put them in the hair blobs. They're not really doing anything useful for us right now. But hey, if we convert these to the first CV, we can really see where the gaps are with a bit of soft selection. So I'm gonna leave it as it is for now. Just gonna apply my rebuild curve. And then next, what I'm going to do is select my curve, select my smooth hair cap, and run my transition script. This one. Now this one does require PyMel. So, bit of an FYI. I could give you something that would snap just the first CV to the head without the transition, or the transition would be harder to control. This was written before Maya decided to move away from PyMel, so I installed it here. There's a way to install it. So in case you need it, you can install it. It's just a bit of a headache, so I'm trying to avoid it now. So let's run the script. So as you can see, a transition curve is being created. I've written the script to update every time a hair is being deformed. The smoother the hair cap is, the smoother the transition would be. And now his comb over really looks like a bald man's comb over, or a wet comb over. But like I said before, all we have to do, DV to the tip, get that soft selection off, and now we're getting like a very violent transition. So now we can come here, soften the transition as much as we need it, and that's about it. Kill history, erase the curve, and in our case also erase the hidden nodes. And if you want to take a look at what these are full projection, and I'm basically making a transition from fully projecting them with different weights for each point. That's what's going on here. So this is now done. You can hide it. Let's take a look at the pony. Actually, no, before we do pony, let's do the onion. So same process here. I think we're crashing into the hair cap. Pretty sure. Not too bad, but we still are crashing. So first, I want to erase any intersections. So this is the intersection script. Let's run it. Oh, and of course, I want to also select the actual scripts, the actual curves, and then the smooth hair cap. It's going to take a moment, and then we're going to select all of the intersecting points, erase them. Could also just push them out, but I feel like it's easier to erase them. Another thing I want to do is, you see how we're very, very tight here towards the tip? So what I want to do is select all of the interior curves, right? And I want to randomize them a little bit. So I'm going to go to the tips, soft selection, and then go back to my, where is it? There we go, to my randomly move around my CVs here. Just make it a bit more noisy. I'm actually going to increase this a little bit. There we go. And this just gives me a little bit less controlled, more volume covering option here, which is, I think, quite nice. I might want to consider maybe deforming this area so it droops a little bit more, but you know, I think I would actually prefer doing this by hand by selecting a couple of these curves, of these interior curves. And then if I do 1, 2, 3, just move this softly. This should give me what I want. Next, I want to rebuild all of these onion curves. So I'll rebuild them to about 33 as well, because they're not really doing anything crazy. So last but not least, we want to snap them to the hair cap. So let's select the smooth hair cap, the curves, run the script, and it's going to do its thing. And I pause to take a sip of my coffee. Next, we're going to do our thing. And make a nice transition for our onion. The onion is basically done. I'm gonna erase my projected curves. Oh yeah, and I did separate the interior actually. That's funny that I forgot about it. Okay, cool. Now, just one more. Let's do it for the pony. Now for the pony, I created a, it's the hair blob, there's a geo2 curve here. And I think it's this polyplane over here that is what I want. There it is. Now it has good UVs. It has the shape. So all I need to do now is select all of my curves. Of course I wanna rebuild them? Let's go something like, I don't know. Should I do 66? I'll do 66. Actually, before I rebuild them to 66, I'm gonna snap them. But I'm not going to snap them quite yet all the way. What I'm going to do instead is grid snap them. So we already erased some of the curves we didn't care for. Now I'm gonna get in here and run my script command, grid command. Now before I do that, of course I want to set a soft selection that's sufficient. Maybe something like this so I don't hurt this guy. Actually, I'm gonna select all of them like that and run my script. And now we get something like this. So you see we have quite a number actually of curves that are not snapped, which is it's pretty painful to see. So we're going to try and snap those in as well. We could actually do it in a very similar way, right? So you see anything that doesn't mathematically fit our situation here is not going to snap properly. So now it is up to us to space some of these curves from each other. You see here we have some that are doubling down on the same area. So we can try and move them around until they find a new place. There's also a situation here where curves that go in one direction grow out of a place that's further away than the curves that go to a different direction. For example, here, I might want to replace these two. So I have a command for that, it's this one. You see now, they're a little bit more aligned to where they want to go. So we can do that for a bit. Let's maybe do something like that here. I'm thinking it's like decent. Maybe replace these two. Yeah, that looks better. Maybe replace. I want to replace anything else? No, I don't really. Maybe this and this one. That looks a bit better-ish. You see where I'm going with this. These two can be replaced. Let's see, it looks much better. This and this looks a bit better. These two. And then just the spacing wise, I feel like this can go a little bit more central. Again, they don't have to like be perfect, but I'd like them to be close to intersecting. Okay. Okay. Something like that. We can come in here and adjust anything that we want. Now, these shorter hairs, it will work better if we separate them. I'm not gonna bother with that at this point. So this is all good. I could even run the script that will snap them a little bit better to, you know, the transition snap script. I don't really feel the need to do that at this point. Here, might want to give it a bit of an angle, and now rebuild all of them to the appropriate length. So 66, I think, will do in a linear manner. So now we should be able to go in there and save this. And look at this. We want to definitely get in here and smooth this transition. And there we go. All of our curves are ready to go. Everything's snapped. Everything's growing out of the head and out of the pony plane. So this is going to be pony plane cap, or cap, like that. And then we can hide it. We can hide our smooth hair cap. We can bring our regular hair cap. Just make sure that the UVs are good. So if I'm going to the UV editor, the UVs are not good. So I'm going to create a planar projection from the y-axis. And then I'm just gonna unfold it. Unfortunately, it also rotates it, so I can always, where is it? Align it to an edge. And then I can always normalize it. So that's gonna kind of do the job for me. All I have to do is shrink it a bit and it's good to go. Kill history, hair cap is good. So at this point, we're ready to save. Gonna get in here, save my scene. All right. Let's jump into the nitty-gritty of xgen, interactive groom, splines, and such. Just gonna make sure that everything here is where it needs to be. So if I hide this, actually that's not what I wanted to do. I want to remove and add it here. So now if I'm, okay, there we go, that's better. That's my curves. Hair blob is off. Geohead is not touchable. And also I don't necessarily want to touch the hair cap, so all I want to select is the curves. Next, I'm going to jump into the editor. I'm going to select my hair cap, and I'm going to create my first description. Now there's two options here. I'm either going to combine these curves or separate them. Because I'm not too... I'm actually going to separate them. So just like I have all of these separate folders, my comb over is going to go first. Everything else I'm going to hide. And come over, I'm going to show. I'm going to select my hair cap. Create interactive gloom and gloom. And this is going to be link comb over. Comb over. Now, all of this is not important at this point. We can change all of that. So I'll start with this as is. Maybe do like 10 instead of 1. And see what we get. So we get something like this. We get a nice, healthy head of hair. So you see the growth pattern actually is matching nicely, like someone's very, very healthy, vigorous growth of hair. At this point, I'm just gonna get rid of sculpt and scale because I want to have minimalism of elements here. And I'm going to start with maybe going to a density of 10. And then also I want to lower my scale to 0.22, let's say. Or sorry, 0.2. There we go, something like that. Gonna taper, start my taper later. And also I want to introduce a bit of taper at the roots, not entirely all the way, but a little bit. And I'm going to activate my anti-aliasing. So I get something like this. This is nice. Next, I'm going to paint only in the areas that I care for. So I'm going to now go into my density brush, which now supposedly is activated. And I'm going to flood everything with a value of 0. Instead of increase, I'm going to put set. And there we go. We have no hair growth. I'm going to set the value of, let's put a value of 100. Why not? And just go over everything here. Is 100 too much? Might be too much. Let's do value of 10. See what it does. Yeah, it's a little bit more manageable. So you see I'm just setting a value. I'm just gonna go around all of the areas that I want to participate in this hair growth, and I'm going to highlight them. I'm going to fill them with hair, including the gap. I'll go something like this, because I don't want hair to grow from where I have no instructions from for it telling it how to grow. So here the hair knows what to do. I of course can also come in here with a value that is 0, and you know, it doesn't have to go all the way. Especially here, there's not really much going on, so I can remove it. Just like have a healthy growth pattern. And just keep in mind the number, the number that you've chosen to use, so you remember to come back to it. So let's say this is it. Next, I want to create another description. So I'm going to select my hair cap, and I'm going to create another interactive groom spline. This time is going to be, how should we go about the name? Let's, instead of link here, we're going to do util. And here, we'll set the density to a smaller one, and kind of keep the width the same. Now here again, I'm going to erase these two nodes, and instead I'm going to bring in a spline. Let's see if I can find it. Curve to spline. So there we go. It's kind of complaining because it has no curves associated with it. So here we can add them. I'll go here and pin and select all of these curves and add them. And you see now splines are being generated alongside these curves. Now, we're not really going to be doing anything with them at the moment. So I'm just going to hide my utility. Actually, I'll leave this open, but hide the actual utility part of it. And instead, I'm going to create now a guide node. I'm gonna select my curves again, and I'm going to load the selected attributes here because it's frozen, right? So if I go to my If I go to my guide, and again I want to select these. Oh yeah, no, first I want to load it, then select these, and then use selected curves as guide. Preserve dynamic link. I like to keep it on. So now I get something like this. Now clearly, you know, there's interpolation going on. It's growing from where it needs to grow, but I need a clump node to get things going. Before I do though, I'm going to also introduce a little bit of settings here on the guide. So see if we can raise it up a bit. I want to have zones. I want to use a region map. And I'm going to generate one now. So you want to tell it where to do it. So I'm just going to create a new folder, call it maps. And there we go, we have a region map, and it's going to be our comb over. There we go. Apply, create. Now we can select a color. So at this point, what I want to do is go to my tool settings and select a color. I want to paint with my artisan brush, and I'm going to flood the whole. Oh yeah, it's maybe better to actually select it here. I'm going to flood the whole head with that, and then use Control to use the opposite color on the opposite side. So what this in theory is supposed to do is separate the two sides from interacting with each other. So interpolation is exactly what we did with the curves here using my little script that was applying a blend shape for them to interpolate together. So here we're just making sure it's like, hey guys, I don't want you to interpolate. No interpolation allowed. So here I go, carefully painting these values in. And we can also preview the color on our splines. So there's our much better looking split. Just want to make sure that we're not invading a territory. There we go, that looks a bit better. And then around here, we kind of do want them to interpolate. You see, we're splitting here in a bit of an obnoxious way. So what I want to do next is create a new map. Same folder here. I'm going to select my folder, and this is going to be comb over create. And then here we're going to keep it white. But in this area over here, I want to come in and just darken it. And you see what it's doing, eh? It basically reduces that split. And that's about it. This is good enough. We can preview the color to get a better idea of what's going on. Now next, what I want to do is introduce a clump. Now, my clump is rebelling against my guide description. Now, it is possible if we go into our, let's see, pin tab. So I don't want to pin my tab anymore. If I'm going to the clump here, I actually want to see what it's doing. We can volumize it, and that will actually show us even more how dire our straights are at this point. There is the ability to use a control map, so we could always try to connect it using a using our node editor to find. Let me just shrink it down a bit. It's a bit large at this moment. So because I have it selected, I could just hover my way to it. So there's my guide, and it has my maps connected to it. There's my maps. I can bring them forth. And then by hitting 3, I'm expanding all of the attributes here, and I don't even necessarily need to do that. I can just drag and drop them into my clump. So this one will go into my map. This one will go into my mask. Which do I want to do? Yeah, sure, why not? Let's see if this does anything. So, you know what, that's actually somewhat doable. So you can see that we can even stay with them the way they are. We can update some painting, but one thing they're not doing is adhering perfectly to our guides. So you see here, if I am to go and select one of my guides here and start manipulating, you see it's not really doing much when it comes to like direct influence over my clumps. So there is a bit of a workaround. It's a bit of an annoying one, but it exists. I'll show it to you now. So that's why I created my utility come over here. If I select it and the clump, and I expand them here and kind of zoom in, so here's my clump, and then let me also select the other guy here. So they're right next to each other, which is wonderful. There's my clump. I'm gonna expand them by hitting 3. And there's my curve to spline, and it's kind of the final shape that comes out of it. I can also expand that. You see this input points here. If I take my out spline data and I connect it to my input points, and then if I activate it in my clump, use input points, and then if I turn it off and turn it on again, you'll see now it's broken. It's not doing what it should. It's not clumping it up. Now the reason it's doing that is because I have a mismatch between the amount of points I have on my curves, which is 33, to the amount of points I have on my comb-over base, which is 36. And it needs to be 33 plus 1, which is 34. And now we are somewhat, only somewhat, matching to our original curve with our clumps. So this is going to be a bit more robust and a bit nicer and easier to control. So now we can get in here, we can adjust, update, change some of the positioning of certain curves. You see, I'm controlling the curves at this point. I'm not even controlling anything internal to xgen. So now I can get in here and I can make some adjustments before I've committed to anything else. Now, what I want to really do here after I'm done making my adjustments, and these are adjustments, of course, that if you know what to expect, you could actually adjust a little bit ahead of time. But I wanted to have, it's not like I was going out of my way to have some issues here with the with the way they're being represented. And again, I can actually rotate from the root, and that keeps the root in place and kind of makes this whole transition a little bit safer. But that's basically what happens. You can see here if we have an imperfect correlation of some of these. Now I can come in here and I can still use, if I dock this or hover it, the smooth, and I can, with that, improve a little bit the representation of these clumps. Because we want whatever grows from the root to be sitting on top of whatever grows lower down the line. You see here, our issue is some of these are coming out too high and intersecting because of that with our exterior clumps. So we don't want that. At least I don't. So I'm getting in there and taking care of these curves. Sometimes just by smoothing them because it's easy. Sometimes by manipulating. Sometimes there's many things you can do. This is a nice way to get things going before we commit to anything too serious. You see here, we can pull him out a bit because there's a bit of a discrepancy. Now, there's another thing that we have to keep in mind. Actually, I should have done this before I started manipulating things, which is if we go to our clump settings here, first of all, we can go from linear to spline when it comes to the thickness of the clump. This will change the way it interpolates. We can, of course, play around with the thickness altogether. You see, this is not really helping me here. There is clump volumize, and now it works better. So it's something you might want to consider. Clump variance, we can increase, decrease. Not a big fan. We could, of course, put in an expression here, and that will make things look much more interesting when it comes to that. And I can show you that as well. And then radius variance, I'm going to keep it on 0. Or maybe not. Maybe I should not. Let's see. Keep it pretty low. I don't want too much variance, especially when there's no need for me to variate anything because I have predetermined clumps. And as you can see here, we have to just really make sure that some of these clumps are very thick, that we're not crashing too much. Density, all of this doesn't matter because we're not really dealing with point generation inside of the clump node. Radius variance, I think we already touched on. Let's see if I start to play around with it too much, you see it starts to cross border lines here, which is not what I want. I think this will do. We can play with curl. We can increase the curl value and then increase the curl scale here. And by rotating it, you see we're getting a bit of a rotation along the length of the guide itself. But you can see it creates a bit of a flattening that I'm not really that much into. Perhaps if we were to volumize, not a big change either way. So we could play with it. Another thing we could do is randomize it. So let's look into that. So beyond the fact that we want to move these clumps in some way so they don't intersect as much as they are right now, another thing we might want to consider is how big are the clumps? Do we need to get in there and perhaps fill some of these gaps? Here, for example, might want to smooth out the transitions. So all of these things we really are noticing now. And we can also resolve a lot of these. especially in areas where it's clear that they're transitioning in a unhealthy way. If I isolate them. But also, it might be a good idea to rework our density map. So if I'm going in here and getting rid of my guides, I can really see where my clumps are getting thicker, and perhaps giving them a bit of a value of 0 here. Can really get in here and concentrate. Maybe reduce some of that growth pattern. Hopefully not crash my Maya. So you can see that it would be a good idea to save I don't know how to pronounce that, iteration, iteratively. I don't know what would be the appropriate way of pronouncing that one, unfortunately. And then as far as these clumps, I feel like we're doing mostly alright. I'm just gonna maybe reduce this one a little bit over here, and then we can always come back and reactivate our guides and keep on working on exposing and hiding some of them. I'm still not very happy with some of these, so it might be a decent idea to create more curves and introduce them both to our spline and to our guide. Next, in our guide, we can hide the transform itself for the guide, and that will make it a little bit less in the way. And then here, if I'm deforming the curves, we can now have a bit of an easier time with controlling them. So next, what I want to do is introduce a secondary curve. So let's do that. Oh, sorry, a secondary clump. So let's do that. So you see right away we have an issue. They don't correlate. So let's first and foremost make them correlate. So they're living together as opposed to working against each other. So we're going to use a control map, but this time we're going to use a clump as a control map. I'm going to increase the density, and you can see now each of our larger clumps now is comprised out of mini clumps. We can play around with the density, making sure that things are not breaking. So another thing we can do is maybe give them a bit of rotation. So actually, yeah, as promised previously, before I took my break, I will get some expressions that we can use and show you how to set those up. So let's take a look at a bunch of expressions. There's many sources where we can take them from. We have to keep in mind that expressions are not always going to work inside of interactive groom xgen. So something like an absolute length, not going to work. Because we cannot sample it in interactive groom. We can only sample some of the global parameters here. So what do we start from here? We can start from random value. I think that would be maybe the most important one. So let's take a look. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into this. You can go deeper, but let's just go to our initial clump here, and then with the curl, we're going to select our clump, bring out our handy dandy node editor, find our clump by hitting F, and then we're going to summon an expse, or so it's xgm seexp. There we go, this guy over here. And once we have him hovering, we select our clump again, and we're gonna drop him right on over this curl. Now, if we then go into the expression editor, we can then paste what we've copied from our web page here. Now, they did not bother to do one thing, which is insert the enters for the different rows of script. So we'll have to do it by hand. You see, every time I'm seeing this $sign, I'm going to drop it down. And then we get something like this. So my random minimum, I'm going to set it to a value from -1 to 0, and I'm going to set it here to -1. And then here it's going to be 0 to 1, and then it's going to be set to 1 as random max. Seed, I don't care much for the seed, but I think that's all we need at this point. Let's apply, and you see we're getting something like this. I'm going to move this guy away. And what we're getting here is our clumps are randomly rotated from a minimum value of -1. Let's make it -0.3 to 0.3. Hit apply. You see we're much more closer to the original state. So we can play around with this. Looks like 0 to 1. I think it may be 0 to -1, maybe like that. Let's try that. Okay, there we go. We still get the effect. And then let's try something like this. There we go. This works a bit better. And there we go. So as we increase these, each one of them will get its own value. I can set it to something less extreme, and we get something like that. And we can play around with how much we want this to occur. Next, we're gonna use this basically for everything. So I'm going to take this now, the amended version of this expression, and I'm going to apply it over here as well. So xgm seexpr is going to be piped right into our curl right here, and then we're going to apply the same kind of expression to our mini clumps here. So you see we can really take it higher, and we'll get more interesting behavior. Let's try the other side, and that's what we get. So now we're starting to get some localized independent behavior. Hopefully this makes sense. Let's try 1. How about we try 3? You get an idea of what's going on here. So something like this will work quite nicely for us. Next, we're going to create another modifier. This is going to be the, let's do the cut modifier next. Now the cut modifier Yet again, we're going to bring out our handy node editor, hit 3, and on the masking, or maybe I should do the amount. I'll do the amount. On the amount, I'll apply another. No, it's XPR, XPR, XGM, XPR. Yeah, there we go. I'm just gonna drop it right on the amount. We're gonna make it absolute, or should I do relative? Maybe I'll do relative. So yeah, we're gonna put it on the percentage and remove the amount. Actually, not remove the amount. And then have the same kind of situation here. So I don't think I need to go from 0 to 1, but let's see what the different options here are going to do. So if I apply it, I get a number like this. Let's set a value of 0. So random minimum is going to be 0 to 1. And random maximum is going to be, let's say, 0 to 1 as well. So it's going to be here 0. Here it's going to be 1. Hit apply. And not much is taking place. How about we go to a value of, let's try 12. Do we get anything here? Yeah, looks like we're getting a bit. Let's take a look here. Yes, something is happening. How about 32? Anything? Yeah, not really. So let's try something different here. Let's disconnect it from the percentage, because to be fair, that shouldn't really change anything but the actual percentage of participating hairs. Instead, let's connect this guy to the masking and leave the percentage alone. Let's go to absolute, break this connection as well. Let's see, what do we get? So now we have a strong separation. And we get some of the hairs to get shorter. I'm still not quite pleased with this though, so I'm gonna try something else. Okay, so I'm liking this more. I'm applying it to the percentage here, just raising the value a little bit. So if I keep it at around 99-ish, we do get something here. And then if we turn off the cut, there we go all the way in. And if we reactivate it, you see we're getting some of our hair to get shorter. And then we can play around with our percentage here. So we don't go to numbers that are getting kind of ridiculous here. So if I go to 66, you get something like this. 44, you get something like that. I feel like I can live with that. So now if we deactivate, reactivate, we get our hairs to have a more interesting ending. Next, let's move on to another modifier called noise. And yet again, we're going to use one of those expressions. Now, magnitude, I'll leave as is. Frequency, I'll go to 0.01-ish, maybe. But then, if I raise my frequency, I get something like this, right? Which is like hair blower was applied hastily. Now, I want this to be my stray hair. So what I'm going to do, as I have my noise selected, I'm going to create another expression. And I'm going to connect it to my masking of the noise. There we go. Quite simple. And again, I'm going to use the same value here. This time 0 to, what is it, 100? I forget what was the original value that we had. 0 to 1. It's going to be 1. See what I get. Most probably, actually, let's see. Actually, instead I'm going to use a percentage. So again, I grabbed it right from here, and as always, it comes incomplete. So that's my percentage, and let's see what this gives me. So I'm going to move this out of the way, and this is what this gives me. This gives me this kind of look. So with a smaller percentage, less hairs are going to be stray. And I could have different layers of strength of stray. So I can apply it like this, but also I could apply it on my magnitude with another expression. Let's try that. So there's my noise. There's my second expression. It's going to be connected to my magnitude. Just going to drag and drop it in there. It will know what to do. And this time, I'm going to go into it, open my expression editor, and here I'm gonna go old-fashioned on it. So I'm gonna copy from, let's close this guy, copy from one of my previous ones, and then paste it right here. So let's take a look at what we're getting. So I want my maximum value to be a value of 10, my minimum value to be a value of 0, and then I don't care about the seed. Let's put 10 and apply. So now some of my hairs are getting further away, some are getting closer. So my magnitude is being modulated. So now I can control how many of these hairs are going to participate in this game. But also as they're coming out, I'm getting a little bit less of an extreme representation of them flying away like that. And I can control this further by playing around with my transition curve here. So let's go into a smooth transition, or maybe even a spline transition. Kind of relax it over here, maybe increase it slightly over here, but then also relax it closer to the tips, so we're not flying away as far as we did previously. And we can play with our magnitude as well. So perhaps we would want it to go a little bit less, maybe like to a number of 8 altogether. And we can play with the seed. You see, a different seed will give a different result. So all of this we're getting procedurally, without using any of our xgen brushes quite yet. you can see some areas where we have shorter hairs. If we bring back our curves here, that we might want to actually lengthen. Maybe even move like that. Just because they're getting all of these effects applied to them, but they're being applied on a shorter clump, and thus creating a much more noisy effect. So if I was to change the ratio here a little bit, I'll have a better looking result. I can bring back my hair, and you can see the result. And you can see the correlation is mostly working quite nicely for us right now. We can keep adjusting. And getting a pretty cool looking hairstyle. Here I can really puff it up, for example. And we get a relatively easy way to deform all of these. Now I'll show you another method that we could use to deform them, beside adjusting the curves. So another way we can do this, inside of our guide, I can add a sculpt modifier. And you see I added it in the wrong place. I actually want to get inside my guide. There's my sculpt modifier, and I'm going to go into my edit mode here. And now I should be able to control my guides by sculpting them. I'm not sculpting directly on the hairs. Rather, I'm sculpting just on my guides. So if I hide my hair system altogether, but I do show my guides, what you'll see me do is actually adjust those. Now I can use my freezing, and I'll shrink it down, so I can freeze just this, invert, and now I can come in here and basically get the same effect, but specifically on that one isolated area. So I can pull on its tip and kind of smooth it out a little bit, lower its protrusion, and then if I bring everything else back, you'll see the effects appear. So I can unfreeze all now, and then maybe do the opposite. I can maybe freeze this hair, and this hair, invert, and then make them come out a bit more. So you'll see in this case. And you see I've selected them in an imperfect way. So let's hide. So I might want to actually redo my selection. Can unfreeze by holding control. Freeze by not holding control. And from here, I can go. So that's another way of doing that. Now, for me, I find the curves to be an equivalent. You see now we have some discrepancy between some of our curves and other curves. because we've applied a deformation within xgen, right? But I find the ability to smooth them quite useful. A whole bunch of other tricks that you can kind of just do with the curves. See, I'm getting a result that I'm a little bit happier with. And also, I find this kind of manipulation to be easy enough for me to do. But if you prefer a brush-based approach, there you go. Now we're going to reactivate everything, and that's kind of what we get. So here we can come in and maybe do something so we don't see the gaps so blatantly. But this is the look, more or less, that I'm going for. So this is my larger noise. One more deformer to seal the deal. And it's going to be another noise. This time, the frequency goes down. The magnitude stays the same, and I can increase it a little bit closer to the center. And this is all I'm going to do here. So I'm keeping myself with a decent looking specular highlight. Another thing I'm going to do is hide my actual guides from the viewport because I don't want to get distracted, and then activate something like the screen space ambient occlusion to get a bit of a nicer view, even though it looks so much more evil that way. Because we can really see areas that could be improved upon. And then for the final touch, I can introduce another sculpt deformer and put it on the very top. Now this time, it all depends if I want to keep my sculpt here or do I want to keep it underneath the noise. So I inherit a little bit of that light level of randomness that I'm getting from my noise being applied. And also this noise I might consider just reducing towards the tips so I get nice pinching towards the tips themselves. Now here in my sculpt, I can now start changing things in a very specific way. And you'll notice that you kind of have to use the freeze function to get a better result to take place. I'll hide my curves because they're confusing me. There we go, this makes more sense. I'll bring my tool settings back, shrink them as much as I can, which is as much as I can, turns out. Invert and sculpt. So now I can really come in and start causing some sort of a havoc. And freeze all. I might want to freeze just this, maybe also just this. So middle click and drag. And then I can control right click, invert, and then go back to my other brush. And then here I can start maybe creating a bit of an S curve. Maybe I want to pull it in, then pull it out. I want to separate it from the ear. Perhaps I want to pinch it even further. Let's see if that works. There we go, that kind of works. I'll pinch it right here. And then maybe doing something like that. Alright, so I have that kind of control. Now, can I unfreeze from here? I could invert, it's kind of cool. Let's see if I can do anything else. Oh, there we go. Shift right click will take us to the freeze. And then I can either invert my freezing effect, and then I can do some sort of adjacent clump treatment. Maybe I want it to actually kind of go like this. So you see, now we really are getting into nice level of control that would be impossible with a different version of xgen. So you see here, we're losing that control over these strays, or we still have it, but it's just a bit more difficult because these strays are there. Actually, no, this is happening from our underlaying noise, so we can still remove them. So I can go to my freeze this, and then I can go to my grab, and then move it out of the way. So we get something like that. Lots and lots of wonderful, wonderful control. Freeze, unfreeze all, and we get something like this. So you can really get in here in places where our curve work didn't give us everything we wanted. We can get in with manual work and really make things happen fast in a localized, controlled kind of way. So that's cool. Let's move on. What do I want to do next? I want to let's see here. A bit of S curvature is always a nice idea. Something like that. Actually, not actually a big fan of what I did here. Maybe lower this guy. Have a more simple back and forth, more simple S curve, and also I might want to get in here, maybe freeze this clump, and then move this one a little bit. And then I can freeze this portion, and then move this one a little bit, create a more interesting overhang. So you see, it doesn't matter where our sculpt node lives. Another cool brush I wanted to show is the noise brush. Now the noise brush becomes interesting not when we do this, which really introduces a lot of noise that I'm not interested in at this point. When we lower the frequency down to and keep it local instead of global, I can keep my magnitude. So what this does is actually thickens, widens, and splits whatever I'm trying to affect here. And camera angle matters. You see, previously it went all the way through the mesh and it affected all kinds of hairs that I was not interested in affecting. But if I do it like this, then I can actually have a bit of a better fill going on here and have a better effect on what I'm doing and really get in here and have a solid effect on what I'm doing. Of course, I could also come in here and introduce another hair system that would be the little hairs that separate and come out and really control the look like that. So this is our first hairstyle portion. It kind of stands on its own in a way, but I want to show a couple more things. So let's go to the more difficult, more complicated. Well, actually, no, let's do the onion real quick. So now I want to reuse this if possible. So I'm going to go into my presets and I'm going to export this. Of course, it will want to save. So maybe what we want to do first, well, Let's actually cancel the whole operation. I'm gonna save with iteration. So it's Control Alt S. I'll get back to you right after. Okay, so we can see a little 01 added here, which means this is our second file. And we're ready to export. So, well, maybe I should pause. I did save, but it wants me to save again. So I'll just pause real quick and come back after we've exported it. And there we go. So if you were wiser than me, you zoomed out a little bit and you have a bit of a better snapshot of your character there. Let's see if I can get a bit of a... Yeah, I can't take another one, unfortunately. It's fine. So then we just want to make sure that we save it in a location that we can find. I'd recommend maybe somewhere within the project that you're working in. Making specifically a preset for that. And then we're gonna give this a file name. So this would be our link main, or is it come over? Come over. Boom. Done. Exported, or maybe now it is exported. And now we're going to try and import it back. Okay, so there we go. It takes a little moment. So now I can select his hair cap, and what I'm gonna do is description import. So let's try that out. These are not very important for me right now. How is it going to transfer and such? Because I don't necessarily need any of these curves to be there, and I'm not generating anything myself within my descriptions here. I'm not really generating the guides myself, so this would be totally fine either way. Of course, I have to select a valid path, because xgen does not remember what we just did a second ago. It is a machine and not a human. And we get something cool like this. So all of our little deformers here are deforming it, but the growth pattern is growing out of the wrong place. So let's reactivate our curves, bring the onion, and start from painting our density map. I'm gonna go value of 0, flood the whole thing, set a value of 10, just like I enjoy, and then start painting. Of course, I could have done the reverse as well. Either way is fine. So here I made a mistake. I could just undo it. So let's set the value on the back here. Now, around the outer corners here, I might want to reconsider and remove this painted clumps. I only want them around the places where I'm intersecting nicely. So I'm gonna put a 0. Unfortunately, the reverse holding control for the reverse effect doesn't really work here. I'm not sure what the story is with this long one here. I don't want to get rid of it, but I'm not sure where it's coming from. This might just come in here and try and get rid of it. create a shape that we can all be proud of. Let's see. Okay, cool. Let's set a value of 10. Come back here with a positive value. Okay, it's just a stray hair, that's what it is. I think we can live with this. I don't know about pride, but definitely coexistence. And this is more like the hairstyle that I would expect from myself if I was to grow my hair long. It's the what you call the priest. Let's try and get these curves into our guide node here. So there it is. I'm going to pin it. I'm going to select my curves and add them. So we get something like this. And then I'm going to go into my utility here. I'm going to load my tab and add them as well. So now, theoretically, my clumps are doing my bidding. So I'm going to take a look at the amount of CVs. I have 33 CVs, which means it's the same CV count that I had originally on my comb over. Now, let's see. So, in all fairness, we don't really need a lot of change here. There's a couple things. There's a reason why I'm separating this. I have had it as a single volume before. The reason I'm separating it is because of these strays. I actually want them in my noise. I want them to, let me cancel this function here. I want them to, there we go. I want them to go all the way into my bun, just like so. And then I can bring back my curves and select the ones that I am trying to adhere to my needs here right now, and I'm just gonna push them in a little bit. Same on the other side, why not? Push them in a little bit. Looking from the top, we can do the same thing here. And I think altogether, this is kind of what I want. You see, I'm crashing them into my bun. And another thing I want to do is maybe on the overall shape that I'm working with here. So this is my density. What I want to look at is my shape node. I actually want to cancel my taper because it doesn't end there. So why taper, right? So I might even do something like this. Just scale them down a little bit. There we go. This is much better. So the bun, nice and easy. Here, our secondary clump is shrinking. I don't really need it to shrink so much. And then our first clump is also shrinking, which, to be fair, is what I want. So let's just take a look here. If I do this, it's no good. So I might actually introduce a bit more noise towards the tips here, because I don't like, I might actually introduce a new noise just to separate these a little bit, because I'm already kind of going against what my clumps want to do. It's my secondary clump. Not a fan of what it's doing here. They are interconnecting. I could play around with my radius variance and my density to try and eliminate some of these stray clumps that I'm getting. And also with the randomness, maybe reduce it. So you see I'm getting like some semi-random behavior that I'm not really a fan of, and this comes from some of the points being not equally distributed where they're growing from, and that's kind of causing the main issues here. So what I'm considering here is introducing another noise, lowering my frequency on the new noise, raising my magnitude. You see I'm separating them here, but then only making it activate somewhere in this area and then completely killing it. We can really expand it and take a better look at what's going on. So if I go here, I can go spline, spline, and then spline. I only want to activate it around here. Because I want to break these separations that are happening. But then I also want to really kill it where it goes into the bun. So procedurally I'm getting something like this. And I can play around with the values here. You see, the lower the value, the less it will randomize. So I'm thinking 0, 1 is a fine value to have. And we can adjust these a bit more. So without, and then with, and then, oops, we can definitely lower the contribution around here. So our noisiness only begins very, very close to the tip. And there we go. Bringing back our upper come over, and we can then come in here and try and introduce a bit more density in an area like here. Let's see if this works a bit better. It does. I might want to bring some more here, but you see if I bring it too high, it starts to interpolate. For better or for worse, right? Like if that's what we want, then it's fine, but this is not what I want. This is a bit better. And you see what was happening there is because I switched my selection, it actually switched which description it was interpolating. So there we go. Now we have the same things that we did with our previous description, we can now apply here. So this is our sculpt. I think it's a decent idea to actually move this noise below the sculpt and then erase this layer and then create a new layer here that we can now activate. And now we can get in here and we can smooth these hairs out. Now, of course, if we overdo it, we're going to lose our clumps. So you have to be careful with that. We're working locally. We're not going to preserve length. And there we go. By canceling that setting, we're actually making our life much easier because we're not preserving length anymore, so it doesn't have to compensate for the changes we make by pulling from the tip. Now we can really get in here and make the necessary adjustments by hand. And there we go. Can come in here again, smooth. I might want to separate a certain clump, for example this one. I'm not gonna, but I might. This one for sure I want to separate. Here I go. I'm going to invert, and then I'm gonna get in here with a large brush and just, that's not what I wanted to do. Grab, and grab it out of there. I don't want no penetration. And there we go. So now, I want to go back to freeze, unfreeze, and my onion is good to go. That's great. Let's move on and import another description. And I think what I'm going to do is concentrate on the ponytail. I think I'm going to skip, or should I do the whole thing? We'll see. I'll start with the ponytail because it requires a different hair cap. So there we go. Let's hide the onion and show the pony and the curves. And let's save iterate. Okay, almost done. Okay, and we're back. So we're going to select our pony, if possible. It looks like in this 2023 version, it does take some restarting of Maya to be able to operate. You see here, I'm having some refresh problems, so I'm gonna do that and we'll be back. And we're back. I had to let Maya die and restart it. Luckily the files are still saving, which is a saving grace. So let's keep moving. We will select our plane and import a preset. So I'll go back to my folder here and reload my preset and most probably get a tangly mess of hair growing out of there. Now, next, what I want to do, what would be the right thing to do at this point, is to rename all of these descriptions to their appropriate names. So this is no longer a comb over. This would be onion. And the fact that there's no naming convention, or maybe there is, but I won't complain until I'm entirely sure. But naming needs to be correct, and this is going to be our pony. Just like that. And everything inside that has comb over should be searched and replaced to be pony. Okay, so otherwise you have all of these trailing numbers, but it's just not great to have inconsistency. What I want to do next is get in here. Actually, I'll keep showing it. And with my density brush, I want to fill it, flood it with the value of 0. And then flood it with the value of 10. So my hair is growing from the entirety of my UVs here. So this will do. Next, I want to go into my utility node. I'm going to pin it and add selected curves. Now, so I can control my clumps with this utility node. Next, I'll go into my guide, load my node, select my curves, and add them. So at this point, we're getting not great results. There's all kinds of shenanigans that are taking place here. So let's see if we can make them hairs behave in a better, more agreeable manner. I'm gonna cancel my pinning here. I'm gonna multiply my density. I kinda thinking somewhere about 80 might do it, maybe even 100 might do it. Next, jumping into my sculpt. I can get rid of that altogether. I don't need it here. My clump. I'm gonna cancel my secondary. Now here, we're having our clumps misbehaving because we have a different CV count for our pony hairs. So let's see what we get in here. We're getting here 66 CVs on a linear interpolation. So what we're gonna do is rebuild our CV count here to be 67, just one more. Let's see if that helps. And then let's see what else do we have here. We have some noise. We have some sculpt that is causing a whole bunch of trouble, so I'm gonna get rid of that. We have some cut. There's my guides. And they're trying to follow this. There's my clump. So at this point, I'm gonna go down, I'm gonna see what this volumizes. Is it adding? Is it subtracting? Honestly, I think it looks better without it. Have 0 variance. We could try and preserve length, or not. I can introduce some randomness, or not. At this point, it shouldn't matter. And then radius variance, maybe keep it at a 0. So you see this brings us the closest to our control curves. We're using a control map here. We should not be using a control map. We have a bit of a automation on the curvature, which is fine. And we could also play with the other. There's an offset. we'll do something like this. You can see, I'm assuming this would be useful again with a random expression. And there's more different things we can apply within the clump, and it would work on each one of these clumps as opposed to each one of these hairs. Now, this one, in theory, should be getting its, let's see, maybe it's the curl that's causing trouble. Let's see what happens if I go to this point and zero it out. It's not looking great. Definitely not helping me here, so I'll zero it out. I guess it's 0.5. There we go. But also I want to make sure that I'm linked to the correct clump here. So this one is going to be our pony, just to be sure. And this one is going to be our pony. And then, yes, it is indeed connected to our clump. Now, next, I want to play with the density. So you see, increasing the density actually correlates it nicely to our pre-existing clumps. We can take it even further. More than that, we can turn our interpolation into a spline and increase the thickness of our clumps over here. So this for sure will be the most difficult effect to achieve. You can see we have all of this twisting taking place here. So we definitely are going to experience some difficulties when it comes to how things are interpolating. Now, do I want to give it a little bit of twist? Yeah, I do. Just a little bit. And at this point, I'm still not ready to hide my curves, but I definitely want to increase my amount of hairs. You see, I'm still getting all kinds of interesting side effects here, and some of them I'll only be able to remove by sculpting. To the best of my knowledge, of course. So you can see radius variance can be quite detrimental to the success of our mission. So I'll leave it be. And density. Different values will create different effects. So you can see that once we set some values, if we start finagling with others, we might get into trouble. Next, there's a couple of options here for increasing the amount of hairs. I would just start with increasing this field over here. I want to get a good amount of hair. I want it to feel full. I don't want to see too many gaps. And if I do see gaps, I'll have to fix that. So if I can take care of it now, might as well do that. So gonna get in here and use my green arrow to try and introduce some hair into an area that's currently not being properly represented, properly covered. I don't want to see too many gaps on the interior. Okay, let's go back. We have our cut. At this point, I can play around with the percentage. I'm thinking 8. Let's see what that does. Let's raise it. I'll get something like this. You can also raise the minimum a bit. I'm getting something like that. And then activate some noise. So I might have to bring back another noise. This one, I'm thinking, gives me a decent effect. Let's see, what do we get here for... I kind of want to increase my noise appearing a little bit earlier, like that. It's a bit too much. Let's lower it a bit. I think that's decent. And then, of course, I'd like to be able to have these be properly represented as well. So I'm gonna play around with moving them and see if there's hair. So there are some hairs that are going there. And what controls these clumps is this parameter here. So I might want to come in here and carefully introduce a bit of a extra volume towards the tips, but not entirely sure if I want to keep it. Let's expand it and take a closer look. I'm thinking something like that. And we definitely will experience some unfortunate side effects of the limitation of the software. Some of these are just very short, and thus the thickness of the tip affects them. So definitely something to consider. But then you see those longer ones don't receive the same kind of benefit. So I'm thinking it would be easier to actually keep it as is and then adjust in sculpt. Next, we also have some unfortunate behavior here that we'll have to fix. Assuming it's the smaller clump, it is. What might work here is increasing the value on density, or not. Actually works fine. There we go. That's decent. A high enough number usually does the trick for me. So we can see some issues that some of them can be repaired relatively easily by just moving clumps around. So I can definitely conceal some of my blemishes by hiding them with the other clumps. And now that I have a more direct visual over what I'm doing, I can actually get in here and start affecting some changes. DV for snapping our tips to a point down the curve. And you can see we can really bend them like that. Of course, actually I'm not sure if this will work. Let's try. Like if I was to use a nonlinear deformer, let's see what happens. Now the problem is, I'd have to start it from here and apply it like that. And then play with the curvature. You see I'm getting something like this. I can also play with the scale. And then just scale history. And there you go, you get a really nice controlled curvature. For these shorter ones, I actually recommend creating a separate description, because the longer effects of our hairs here that work for the longer hairs clearly are not working for the shorter ones. So as you can see, this creates a problem. So we either expand the size significantly, or we separate it. Or we get in here with our brushes later on, which is also a totally acceptable workaround, because this, at the end of the day, this workflow is a lot about hands-on approach. So you see, we're starting to get something here. And we can continue on this journey to try and get even more. Here I might actually benefit from extending it. And then I might actually get in here, maybe, yeah, all the way through, and smooth it out a bit. Here we seem to be suffering from a clump, wanting to do something other than what I would like it to do at this point. But not to despair. Some of these side effects have to do with our clump 3. So resetting the clump might do it for us. Changing a parameter or two. Perhaps lowering the twisting, the curling that is taking place here. Or perhaps not. So you can see the effects. Are they increased or decreased? Is this an issue or not? And we continue to adjust them now with the visuals. In some cases, pulling them further. Keep in mind that when we get segmented in our curves, we get segmented in our visuals as well. Perhaps I want to pull this one out a bit further, in order to see the effect. A little bit better. So that's the gist of it, to be honest. That this is kind of where I wanted to get at this point. I wouldn't want to go much further into the things, xgen splines, curves, and other participants in this creation of this hair are capable of. I feel like this is a good enough introduction, gives us a solid start, and from here, what we can do next, once we establish our not spare, what's the word I'm looking for here? Stray noise, and we introduce a little bit more all around lower frequency and fairly low magnitude as well noise. Definitely want to reduce it towards the tip. We're starting to get a look that we can live with, that we can work with, and then eventually getting in here with a bit of sculpting. Perhaps just under the final noise, perhaps not. Set it on edit mode and starting to introduce more noise to break up some of these clumps. The way they rotate, the way they shrink, of course, can be a problem. So we can definitely get in here and increase some of the volume that some of these areas will have. And we can mask or unmask certain parts until we get the kind of look that we were striving to. And the brushes are very powerful. I'm just touching on what can be done using the brush approach. You can imagine how far you can take it with enough TLC. You can really increase the individual look, the twists, the turns, the separation, reunification, and that preserve length function checkbox. It's nice not to have it there as well. Can get in here, and then of course also smoothen without preserving the length will do some great things for us as well. And most importantly, freezing and unfreezing will be the same. You can hide our curves and concentrate entirely on our visual, on the visual of our hair. And keep in mind, you kind of have to look at it from an angle that is not being hidden by anything. So this is the source of my previous struggles. So the angle wasn't working for me. And of course, we can always bring back our curves in order to present a different part of our clump. And then hide them again. Alternatively, we can hide them. I think it's easier like this. There we go, yeah. So now, if I go back to my visibility layers, I can hide the cap layer. Of course, before I do, I could also concentrate on, creating some sort of a visual representation of a hair bun of sorts. So always possible to create some sort of a ring of an appropriate size. And then if I get rid of everything else and concentrate on this very long name, I'm gonna merge the verts, just in my case. Perhaps center pivot shrink, scale it up. There's definitely some love that needs to be devoted to this area. And then I can always do something like this. Now, if I go back to my attribute editor, sorry, that's not it, to my xgen attribute editor, this can be one. And I can go back to my sculpt, perhaps make some amendments. I don't know exactly what happened here. Let's see if I activate the curves, no problem here. So I'm assuming somewhere down the line I'm inheriting some sort of behavior that is unwanted, but the beauty of this is we can brute force our way through it. Let's see. I'm on the right layer. Can we brute force our way through it? I think we can. Let's try. Not sure why some of it is growing in the opposite direction. But, well, I think that marks the end of the tutorial.